In early 2026, a sudden report shocked morning television viewers. A man named Tomaso was quietly named a prime suspect in a developing investigation tied to powerful media circles in New York. The news spread quickly, but one detail stood out. Savannah Guthrie's husband, Michael Feldman, remained completely silent. No statements. No interviews. No denials. The silence raised even more questions. What exactly happened behind closed doors? And why are some people refusing to speak? Stay with us as the full timeline begins to unfold. The story began on an ordinary morning. Newsrooms across the United States were already busy. Producers prepared morning segments. Journalists checked overnight updates. And millions of viewers were starting their day with coffee and television. Then a short online report appeared. It was brief, only a few paragraphs long. But the headline was enough to capture attention. A man named Tomaso had reportedly been named a prime suspect in a developing investigation connected to influential media and business circles in New York City. At first, the report seemed vague. There were few details. No full explanation of the investigation. No clear description of the alleged incident. Only a single line confirming that authorities were reviewing information tied to individuals connected to the media world. Still, the story spread quickly. Within minutes, the headline appeared on multiple news aggregator sites. Social media users began sharing screenshots and asking questions. Online commentators started speculating about who Tomaso might be and what the investigation involved. New York has long been the center of American media. Major television networks, publishing companies, and political communications firms all operate within the city. Because of that, even a small rumor can travel fast. And this rumor moved faster than most. Reporters began searching public records. Some looked through business databases. Others examined older news articles that mentioned the name Tomaso. At first, information was limited. But as the hours passed, a possible connection began appearing in online conversations. The name Savannah Guthrie entered the discussion. Guthrie had been one of the most recognizable faces in American television for years. As co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, she appeared in millions of homes every morning. Her work as a journalist had covered presidential elections, Supreme Court decisions, and international news. But this story had nothing to do with her reporting. Instead, attention turned towards someone much more private. Her husband, Michael Feldman. Feldman was not a television personality. He worked behind the scenes in political communications and consulting. For decades, he had advised companies, political leaders, and nonprofit organizations. His career included service in the White House during the Clinton administration. Later, he became a respected communications strategist working in Washington and New York. Colleagues often described him as careful and disciplined. He rarely appeared in interviews. He rarely made public statements. But now his name was appearing in online discussions connected to the Tomaso investigation. It started with speculation. Some users claimed that Tomaso had attended private gatherings where members of media and political circles were present. Others suggested that certain financial or professional networks might overlap. None of these claims were confirmed, but the internet was already moving faster than the facts. By midday, several independent bloggers and media commentators were repeating the same question. Did Michael Feldman know Tomaso? Major news organizations avoided making that claim. Responsible outlets waited for confirmation before reporting connections. Still, curiosity was growing. Journalists began reviewing Feldman's professional history. Born in 1968, Feldman had built his career in communication strategy. After studying at Tufts University and Georgetown Law, he entered the world of politics. In the 1990s, he worked as a spokesman during the Clinton administration. Later, he moved into consulting, helping organizations manage public messaging during complex situations. Over time, he developed a reputation for discretion. He was known as someone who understood how media narratives worked. And that reputation made the next detail even more surprising. When the speculation about Tomaso began spreading, Feldman said nothing. No statement appeared from his office. No lawyer released a clarification. No social media response addressed the rumors. Even reporters who reached out privately received no reply. For someone who had spent decades managing communication strategies, the silence felt unusual. Some observers believed it was a legal decision. Others believed the rumors were simply not serious enough to address. But silence has a strange effect in modern media. The absence of an answer often creates more questions. By evening, the story had grown much larger than the original report. Television analysts began discussing the investigation in cautious language. They emphasized that being named a suspect does not mean guilt. Still, the curiosity remained. Who exactly was Tomaso? What investigation was unfolding behind the scenes? And why had one of the most experienced communications professionals in Washington chosen to remain completely silent? Those questions would soon lead reporters down a path filled with unexpected connections. But as journalists began digging deeper into Tomaso's identity, they discovered details that raised even more troubling questions. As reporters searched for answers, one problem quickly became clear. Very little was known about Tomaso. The name had appeared suddenly in connection with an investigation. Yet official records about him were scattered and incomplete. For journalists trying to understand the story, that made the situation even more complicated. They began with the most basic step: public business records. Several filings showed that a man with the name Tomaso had been involved in multiple business ventures between the late 2010s and early 2020s. Some of those ventures were based in New York. Others appeared connected to companies operating in Europe. On paper, the businesses looked ordinary: consulting services, investment partnerships, technology projects. Nothing immediately suggested controversy. But a closer look revealed a pattern that reporters found unusual. Some companies closed suddenly. Others disappeared from public listings after only a few years. Former employees later described projects that began with strong promises but ended quietly, sometimes without clear explanation. This did not necessarily indicate wrongdoing. Startups often fail. Investments collapse. Business partnerships fall apart. Still, investigators reportedly began reviewing one specific venture connected to Tomaso. According to several media reports at the time, the inquiry focused on confidential communications exchanged between investors and outside consultants. Those communications may have included financial agreements and sensitive business strategies. Sources familiar with the situation suggested that investigators were examining whether certain information had been shared improperly. But authorities remained extremely careful about what they revealed publicly. Law enforcement officials confirmed only one detail: Tomaso had been identified as a person of interest in an ongoing inquiry. That phrase carried weight. Being named a person of interest does not mean someone has committed a crime. It simply means investigators believe the individual may have information relevant to the case. Still, the phrase often attracts attention. And attention was exactly what this investigation began to receive. Journalists soon noticed another interesting detail. Tomaso seemed to move through professional circles that overlapped with media consultants, political strategists, and private investors. In cities like New York and Washington, those worlds often connect. Consultants advise corporations. Investors fund media startups. Political strategists appear on television panels. The networks are complex and tightly woven. Because of that overlap, reporters began examining social events, conferences, and professional gatherings where Tomaso might have met other well-known figures. Photographs from industry events surfaced online. Guest lists from charity functions were reviewed. Private networking events from the past decade were quietly analyzed by reporters searching for clues. Most of these connections were distant. Some were only rumors. But the speculation continued growing. And eventually the same name kept appearing in conversations again: Michael Feldman. At first, the connection seemed extremely weak. No official document linked Feldman to Tomaso. No verified report confirmed that the two men had ever worked together. Still, both names appeared within overlapping social and professional environments. In a city where media, politics, and business frequently intersect, that overlap was enough to spark curiosity. Observers began asking careful questions. Had the two men ever attended the same event? Had they worked with the same investors? Had their professional circles crossed paths at some point? So far, there were no clear answers. Responsible news organizations repeated the same warning. Speculation is not evidence. But the story was no longer small. Every day, more people were hearing about the investigation. And every day, one detail remained strangely consistent. Michael Feldman still had not said a word. No interviews. No written statements. No attempts to address the rumors spreading online. For a man known for guiding others through media crises, the silence seemed almost strategic. But whether that silence was caution, legal advice, or something else entirely remained unknown. And the deeper journalists looked into Tomaso's background, the more they realized something important. This story might not only be about one suspect. It might also be about the powerful social networks surrounding him. And those networks appeared to lead closer and closer to the world of national television. And that growing curiosity would soon shift attention toward a household name that millions of viewers recognized every morning. Because to understand the speculation surrounding Michael Feldman, it was necessary to understand the public life he shared with Savannah Guthrie. For many viewers across the United States, Savannah Guthrie is a familiar face. Every weekday morning, she appears on television screens across the country. As co-anchor of NBC's Today, she helps deliver the news to millions of households. Her career in journalism has stretched across decades. But the attention now surrounding her family began long before the Tomaso investigation ever appeared. Savannah Guthrie was born in Melbourne, Australia, in 1971, while her father was working there. Her family later returned to the United States and settled in Arizona. She grew up in Tucson. As a young student, Guthrie showed strong interest in law and communication. She eventually studied journalism at the University of Arizona and later earned a law degree from Georgetown University. For several years, she worked as a lawyer. But journalism continued to call her back. By the early 2000s, she had moved into television reporting, working as a correspondent covering legal affairs and political stories. Her ability to explain complex topics in simple language quickly made her stand out. In 2007, she joined NBC News. At first, she worked as a legal analyst. Soon she began appearing more frequently across different NBC programs. Then in 2011, a major opportunity arrived. Guthrie became co-host of the third hour of the Today Show. Just 1 year later, in 2012, she was named co-anchor of the main broadcast. The role placed her at the center of American morning television. Millions of viewers watched as she interviewed presidents, celebrities, and global leaders. Her calm and thoughtful style earned praise across the industry. But while Guthrie lived much of her professional life in the public eye, her husband preferred something very different. Michael Feldman stayed mostly out of the spotlight. The two first met in 2008. At the time, Feldman was already a well-established communications strategist in Washington, D.C. Friends described him as thoughtful, disciplined, and extremely private. Unlike many people connected to television personalities, Feldman rarely sought attention. He focused on his work behind the scenes. Over the years, his career included advising major corporations and nonprofit organizations. Earlier in his life, he had also worked in the White House during President Bill Clinton's administration. Colleagues respected his ability to manage complex communication challenges. In many ways, his career involved guiding others through public crises. That made the events unfolding in early 2026 feel strangely ironic. The couple married in March 2014. The ceremony took place in Tucson, Arizona, surrounded by close family and friends. The wedding received national media coverage, largely because of Guthrie's popularity on television. At the time, the couple also shared joyful news. They were expecting their first child. Later that same year, their daughter was born. 2 years later, in 2016, their son joined the family. For years afterward, the couple appeared to live a balanced life between demanding careers and family time. Guthrie continued hosting one of the most watched morning programs in America. Feldman continued his work in communications and consulting. Public controversies rarely touched their household, which is why the sudden speculation in 2026 caught so many people off guard. Online discussions began asking whether Feldman might have crossed paths with Tomaso through professional or social networks. But verified information remained extremely limited. Major news organizations repeated the same caution. There was no confirmed evidence connecting Feldman to the investigation. Still, the curiosity continued growing. Part of the reason was simple. When someone connected to a public figure becomes linked to rumors or speculation, the story naturally attracts attention. Viewers felt they knew Savannah Guthrie. They saw her every morning. They trusted her reporting. That emotional connection made the mystery surrounding her husband feel even more personal to many observers. But the strongest source of curiosity remained the same: silence. Neither Feldman nor Guthrie addressed the speculation publicly. NBC News also declined to comment on the developing story. Days passed. Then weeks. The investigation continued quietly in the background. And while reporters kept searching for evidence, another detail slowly began to emerge. Investigators were reportedly reviewing communications that might link several people within the same professional circle. If those reports were accurate, the situation could become far more complicated. Because when private messages and business records enter an investigation, the truth often becomes much clearer. But the public had not yet seen that evidence. And until those details emerged, the silence surrounding the case would only make the mystery grow larger. Then a new report suggested that investigators were reviewing communications that might connect several people in the same social circle. In high-profile investigations, silence often becomes part of the story. When public figures face sudden attention, responses usually arrive quickly. Lawyers release statements. Representatives speak to reporters. Social media accounts publish brief explanations meant to calm speculation. But in this situation, something different happened. Michael Feldman remained completely silent. Days passed after the first headlines appeared. Journalists contacted his office for comment. Emails were sent. Phone calls were made. No response came. The silence did not automatically mean anything unusual. Legal experts often advise clients to avoid speaking during active investigations. A single public comment can create legal complications or be misinterpreted. Still, the quiet created a vacuum. And in the modern media environment, a vacuum rarely stays empty for long. Online discussions began filling that space. Commentators across social media platforms started analyzing every detail they could find. Old photographs appeared online. Some showed Feldman attending professional events in Washington and New York. Others showed gatherings where media figures, political consultants, and investors shared the same rooms. Most of these events were completely ordinary: networking dinners, charity fundraisers, professional conferences. In cities like New York and Washington, those types of gatherings happen every week. But once speculation begins, even ordinary moments can be examined through a different lens. Some online users tried to identify whether Tomaso had attended similar events. A few photographs appeared showing a man believed to be Tomaso at private business gatherings years earlier. However, none of those images clearly confirmed a connection with Feldman. Responsible news outlets continued repeating the same message. There was no verified evidence linking Feldman directly to the investigation. Still, curiosity kept growing. Part of the reason was timing. The media world had already experienced several high-profile controversies in recent years. Stories involving powerful figures often revealed unexpected details after long periods of silence. Because of that history, observers watched the situation carefully. Reporters continued searching for verified facts. Meanwhile, Savannah Guthrie continued her work at NBC's Today. Each morning, she appeared on television as usual. The studio lights were bright. The cameras moved quietly across the set. Producers spoke through headsets while the program flowed from one segment to another. To viewers at home, everything looked normal. But behind the scenes, journalists knew the speculation surrounding her family was growing. Still, Guthrie did not address the rumors during the broadcast. NBC News also avoided public comment. Large media organizations often follow strict legal guidelines when employees become connected to outside investigations. Statements are carefully reviewed before anything is released. In this case, the network remained cautious. Legal analysts offered possible explanations. One possibility was simple legal strategy. Attorneys may have advised everyone involved to remain silent while investigators gathered information. Another possibility was that the rumors themselves were inaccurate. If the speculation had no real connection to Feldman, responding publicly could give the story unnecessary attention. Either way, the quiet continued. Days turned into weeks. During that time, investigators reportedly continued reviewing documents connected to Tomaso's business activities. Financial records, communications, and agreements were being studied carefully. These types of investigations often move slowly. Each document must be verified. Each communication must be placed within the correct timeline. Only then can investigators determine whether any wrongdoing actually occurred. For the public watching from the outside, however, the process felt mysterious. The lack of visible updates created uncertainty, and uncertainty often fuels speculation. Some commentators believed the investigation would fade away quietly once the facts were confirmed. Others believed new revelations might still appear. History has shown that both outcomes are possible, but one thing remained clear. Silence had transformed a small report into a national conversation. Because when well-known names appear near an unfolding investigation, every unanswered question becomes part of the story. And just as the speculation seemed to reach its peak, investigators reportedly began reviewing evidence that could determine whether the connections were real or only coincidence. Investigations rarely move as quickly as the public expects. Behind closed doors, the process is careful and methodical. Law enforcement agencies must gather evidence, confirm facts, and examine records before reaching any conclusions. In the Tomaso case, much of that work was happening quietly. Officials had confirmed only a few details. Tomaso had been identified as a person of interest. Investigators were reviewing business communications connected to financial disputes. Beyond that, authorities released very little information. This level of caution is common in complex cases. Legal experts explain that early speculation can easily mislead the public. Information may appear important at first, but later turn out to be unrelated. Because of this, investigators often avoid sharing details until they are completely verified. For the public, however, waiting for answers can feel frustrating. Weeks after the first report appeared, people were still asking the same questions. Who exactly was Tomaso? What role did he play in the investigation? And were the rumored connections to media figures real or only coincidence? Meanwhile, the daily routines of television continued. Savannah Guthrie remained on the Today Show each morning. The Bright Studio in Rockefeller Center continued operating like it had for decades. Guests arrived. Headlines were discussed. Interviews filled the program. To many viewers, nothing seemed different. But behind the scenes, journalists understood that the situation remained unresolved. Michael Feldman continued to stay out of the spotlight. No interviews appeared. No public statement explained his position. Observers debated the meaning of that silence. Some believed it showed confidence that the rumors would eventually disappear. Others believed the investigation was simply too sensitive to discuss publicly. In legal matters, silence can serve many purposes. It can protect privacy. It can prevent misunderstanding. And sometimes, it allows investigators to complete their work without outside pressure. But the lack of information also leaves space for curiosity. Media historians note that many high-profile investigations unfold slowly before reaching a clear turning point. Sometimes that turning point arrives when authorities release official findings. Other times it comes through court proceedings where documents and testimony become public. Until that moment arrives, the full picture often remains hidden. In the Tomaso investigation, that moment had not yet come. The known facts remained limited. Authorities continued reviewing evidence, and public attention remained fixed on the unanswered questions surrounding the case. In situations like this, time often becomes the most important factor. As weeks turn into months, new information eventually surfaces. Documents appear. Witnesses speak. Investigators reveal what they have discovered. Only then can the truth become clear. For now, the investigation remains unfinished. And until its findings are revealed, the mystery that began with a single headline continues to echo through media circles. Because somewhere within those unanswered questions, the real story may still be waiting to emerge. The investigation that began with a brief headline has left many questions unanswered. Until officials reveal their final findings, the story remains incomplete, reminding viewers how quickly speculation can grow when facts are still unfolding. If you enjoy deep documentary stories that explore real events and unanswered mysteries, consider subscribing for more detailed investigations and compelling real-life narratives.